If I lived on autopilot, a story written by someone else? Jung would say that safety is seductive, but it's not the same as meaning. And meaning is what our souls crave. It shows up in the quiet moments. When a song hits you in the chest, when a stranger's kindness brings you to tears, when a memory pulls you back to something sacred. It's not always dramatic, but it's real, and it's worth chasing. If you're still watching, you're probably someone who's drawn to this kind of depth. So, again, hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. We're building a space here for people who want more than surface-level conversations. Join in and share your take in the comments. What have you been discovering in your own inner world lately? Jung also taught that the psyche isn't a problem to be solved. It's a mystery to be lived. And living a mystery means being willing to not have everything figured out. It means letting go of the illusion that life is linear or that growth is a straight path. Sometimes we go backward to move forward. Sometimes breakdowns lead to breakthroughs. Sometimes losing yourself is the first step to finding yourself. And there's no map, no checklist, no guaranteed outcomes, just a willingness to show up, to keep asking the hard questions, to keep noticing the symbols that appear in your life, to keep paying attention to what stirs you. Because that's where the real transformation happens. Not in achieving some ideal version of yourself, but in slowly uncovering the self that's been waiting beneath the noise. The self that knows. The self that remembers. You can't rush this work. You can't bypass it with good intentions or spiritual bypassing. It requires humility. It requires patience. And sometimes it requires falling apart. But even in the falling, there's wisdom. Jung believed that what we resist not only persists, it grows stronger. So when we turn toward the pain instead of away from it, when we stop pretending and start listening, something shifts. We start to see patterns we couldn't before. We start to understand our triggers, our fears, our longings, not as flaws, but as clues. The psyche is always speaking. The question is, are we willing to hear it? Are we willing to sit in the discomfort long enough for it to reveal something deeper? Because healing isn't always about fixing. Sometimes it's about witnessing, about being with what is without needing it to be different. And that changes everything. When you stop fighting your inner world and start befriending it, you begin to trust yourself in a whole new way. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop waiting for external validation. You stop playing roles that don't fit. And slowly you start to live from the inside out. That's where the power is. Not in controlling your life, but in being present with it. That presence changes how you love, how you create, how you show up. You start to see others more clearly because you've dared to see yourself. And that kind of self-awareness is contagious. It ripples out. It softens the way we move through the world. That's what Jung meant when he said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. It's terrifying because it means letting go of every mask, every false identity, every illusion of control. But it's also liberating, because once you stop pretending, you're free to live. Not perfectly, not without fear, but fully. And in a world that's constantly asking you to be more, do more, perform more, what could be more radical than simply being yourself? That's the revolution. Not outside, but within. And if this kind of reflection speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe. Let's keep this space alive with real conversations. Share your voice in the comments. I want to hear how this journey is unfolding for you. Because in the end, no one else can walk your path. No one else can interpret your dreams, face your fears, or integrate your shadow. That's your sacred work. And yes, it's hard, but it's also the most beautiful, most meaningful work you'll ever do. The work of becoming, of remembering, of returning to who you really are. Life often feels like a puzzle with missing pieces, and Carl Jung's thoughts invite us to explore the deeper layers beneath the surface. He suggested that much of what drives us is hidden in the unconscious, a vast territory within ourselves that shapes our decisions, fears, and desires without us even realizing. Imagine waking up every day and realizing that parts of you are like shadows, moving silently behind your actions, influencing your behavior in ways you never consciously notice. How would it change your relationship with yourself and others if you started acknowledging these hidden forces? Jung believed that embracing the unconscious wasn't just about self-awareness but a path toward wholeness, a concept he called individuation, the process of integrating all aspects of our personality into a unified self. This idea is fascinating because it challenges the common belief that we are fully in control of our minds. Instead, it shows life as a continuous dialogue between the conscious and unconscious, where the more we suppress or ignore the parts of ourselves, the more fragmented and conflicted we become. Think about moments when you acted in a way that surprised you, or felt inexplicably drawn to something without clear reasons. Those are often glimpses of the unconscious pushing through. Now, what if we took time to listen more carefully to these inner signals? Could life's challenges turn into opportunities for profound growth? It's no coincidence that Jung saw myths, dreams, and symbols as keys to unlocking the unconscious. These are universal languages our psyche speaks, offering clues to what lies beneath. When you dream or encounter a powerful symbol, it's like receiving a message from your deeper self. Imagine a person struggling with constant anxiety. Instead of just fighting the symptoms, Jung might suggest exploring what the anxiety symbolizes, perhaps an unacknowledged fear or a shadow aspect of the personality. This approach shifts the focus from merely fixing problems to understanding their roots, turning the inner journey into a creative adventure. Now, reflecting on Jung's views can bring up a natural question. How do we navigate the tension between who we think we are and these hidden parts? It's a question everyone faces at some point. The answer isn't simple, but it lies in patience and openness. When we resist the unconscious, life often forces us to confront it through crises or repetitive patterns. But when we accept it, even the darkest corners of the psyche become sources of insight and strength. This acceptance doesn't mean surrendering to chaos, but rather embracing complexity with courage. This is a perfect moment to remind you that if you're intrigued by these deep dives into understanding the mind and life, subscribing to this channel is a great way to stay connected. We explore ideas that challenge and expand how we see ourselves and the world, creating a community where curiosity leads the way. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What unconscious aspects have you noticed shaping your life? Drop a comment below and let's start a conversation. Digging deeper, Jung's concept of the shadow is essential to understanding his perspective on life. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves we deny, often because they don't fit the image we want to project. It includes traits like anger, jealousy, or vulnerability that society or we ourselves label as unacceptable. But Jung argued that ignoring the shadow only makes it grow stronger, like a suppressed storm gathering power. Facing it honestly requires courage because it means confronting parts we don't like or fear. Yet, this confrontation is liberating. It's the way to reclaim lost energy and creativity. Imagine a famous artist who struggled for years with self-doubt and hidden resentment but, through therapy and self-reflection, began to embrace these feelings instead of pushing them away. Suddenly, their work gained new depth and authenticity. This transformation echoes Jung's belief that the shadow, when integrated, fuels creativity and wholeness. So, could embracing your own shadow unlock potentials you never knew you had? How often do we choose comfort over this challenging but rewarding path? Another core idea Jung discussed is the archetypes, universal, inherited symbols and roles that shape human experience across cultures and time. These archetypes appear in stories, religions, and dreams, influencing how we perceive ourselves and others. For example, the hero's journey is an archetype familiar to almost everyone, symbolizing the struggle for growth, facing trials, and ultimately achieving transformation. Recognizing these patterns can help us make sense of our own life stories, and life, as Carl Jung saw it, is not just a series of events happening to us but a profound journey inward and outward, a dance between the conscious and the unconscious. He believed that much of what shapes us lies beneath the surface, hidden in the depths of the psyche, waiting to be understood. Think about that for a moment. How often do we stop to question who we truly are beyond our daily roles and routines? Jung would say that to live authentically, We need to engage with those hidden parts of ourselves rather than push them away or ignore them. This process, which he called individuation, is like peeling layers off an onion, revealing more complexity and richness beneath. It's not a comfortable path. Sometimes it feels like facing shadows we'd rather not see, but it's necessary if we want to grow. Have you ever noticed how the most challenging moments in life often lead to the deepest insights? That's no accident. According to Jung, confronting our personal unconscious and integrating those parts into our conscious self leads to a fuller, more balanced existence. Jung's idea that the psyche is made up of opposites, light and dark, masculine and feminine, rational and emotional, reminds us that life is not about choosing one side but embracing both. For example, many people reject their own vulnerability or emotions because they seem weak, but Jung suggests that true strength comes from accepting and understanding those feelings. When you allow yourself to feel deeply, you tap into a well of creativity and authenticity that logic alone can never reach. Now, if you're finding this perspective intriguing, don't forget to hit subscribe. There's so much more to explore about how these ideas can transform the way we see ourselves and our relationships. By subscribing, you stay connected with conversations that challenge and inspire you to dig deeper into your own life. Back to Jung. He also talked about the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of symbols, myths, and archetypes that connect all humans. This means that when you dream or encounter certain powerful images, you're tapping into something universal. For instance, the hero's journey, the mother figure, the shadow. These are not just personal experiences but part of a larger human story. Recognizing this can give our personal struggles a new meaning, showing us that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. And speaking of the shadow, it's one of Jung's most famous concepts. The shadow represents the parts of ourselves we deny or reject, often because society tells us they're unacceptable. But ignoring the shadow doesn't make it disappear. In fact, it can grow stronger and manifest in unhealthy ways, like projecting our fears or prejudices onto others. Integrating the shadow means acknowledging those darker sides and finding a way to live with them consciously. This can be scary but also liberating, as it frees us from being controlled by hidden fears and allows us to act with more awareness. Imagine someone who always prides themselves on being kind but suppresses anger or jealousy. That suppressed energy might leak out unexpectedly or create inner tension. Jung's message would be, recognize and accept those emotions as part of your humanity. Only then can you move toward balance and wholeness. This balance isn't about perfection but about embracing imperfection with honesty. Here's a thought. How often do we look outside for validation or happiness when Jung's work suggests that true fulfillment comes from within? By exploring our unconscious motivations and shadows, we become less reactive to external circumstances. That doesn't mean life becomes easier, but it does mean we gain resilience and clarity. If this resonates with you, take a moment now to subscribe and join a community curious about these deeper questions. Your insights matter here, and sharing your perspective in the comments can enrich everyone's understanding. What aspects of yourself have you discovered by facing your own shadows or unconscious drives? How has that changed the way you live? Jung also saw symbols and dreams as a language of the unconscious. When you dream, you're not just seeing random images but receiving messages from your deeper self. Learning to interpret those symbols can guide you through difficult choices or reveal hidden conflicts. For example, a recurring dream about water might symbolize emotions, while a journey through a dark forest could reflect a period of uncertainty or transformation. By paying attention to these signs, we can better navigate life's challenges. It's fascinating how Jung's ideas bridge psychology and spirituality. He didn't see them as opposites but as complementary paths to understanding the human experience. This holistic approach invites us to explore not only our minds but also the meaning behind our existence. What gives your life meaning? How do your personal myths and St. acknowledges the full complexity of being human. We're not just good or bad, right or wrong, we're all of it at once. Imagine the relief in that. To not have to pretend. To not have to hide. To not have to perform an identity that doesn't quite fit. That's the kind of authenticity Jung was inviting us into. And yet, our culture often rewards conformity over authenticity. We're taught to fit in, to follow the rules, to avoid making waves. But what happens to the parts of us that don't fit? They don't disappear, they go underground. And that's where they start to cause problems. If this is making you think differently about yourself or your journey, don't forget to subscribe. These are the kinds of conversations we have all the time here. And let us know in the comments what part of Jung's philosophy hits home for you the most. The more we deny what's inside us, the more it controls us. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's not just poetic, it's practical. How many times have you repeated the same mistake and wondered why? The same kind of relationship, the same kind of failure, the same kind of regret. That's not fate. That's the unconscious, pulling the strings behind the scenes. But once we see the pattern, we can change the dance. It's also why Jung emphasized the importance of shadow work. That's the process of turning toward the parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. The jealousy, the rage, the insecurity, the pain. Not to indulge them, but to understand them. To find the source. To listen. Because those parts of us aren't enemies. They're exiled parts of the psyche, longing to be welcomed home. And when we do welcome them, we gain access to energy and insight we didn't even know we had. Shadow work isn't just for therapists or spiritual seekers. It's for anyone who wants to stop being ruled by unconscious forces. It's for anyone who wants to live with more clarity, more purpose, more honesty. And it's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real, fully human, fully alive. Another core idea Jung introduced is the anima and animus, the inner feminine in men and the inner masculine in women. These aren't about gender roles. They're psychological energies that exist within all of us. By integrating these inner opposites, we become more balanced. A man who connects with his anima might find deeper empathy, intuition, or emotional depth. A woman who integrates her animus might feel more assertive, confident, or intellectually independent. It's about wholeness, not rigid identities. And that wholeness often emerges in silence, in solitude, in contemplation. Jung spent much of his later life retreating to a tower he built in Bollingen, Switzerland, where he could write, think, and reflect. He believed that modern life had become too noisy, too fast, too external. We've lost touch with the inner world, but that inner world holds the key to meaning. We can chase achievements, possessions, and recognition, but without inner alignment, none of it satisfies. Have you ever reached a goal and still felt empty? That's the soul calling for something deeper. We live in a world that rewards productivity, but not introspection. That prizes answers but fears questions. But Jung knew that the most important questions don't have quick answers. They unfold over time. They deepen us. Questions like, who am I? Really? What am I here for? What am I avoiding? These questions aren't signs of confusion. They're signs of awakening. And in that awakening, we start to notice the synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that seem too perfect to be random. Jung believed synchronicities were glimpses into the deeper order of the universe. Not magic, but a mysterious alignment between inner and outer worlds. Like thinking of someone and then they call, or stumbling across exactly the book you needed to read. These moments remind us that we're connected to something larger. They invite us to pay attention. The path Jung laid out isn't easy, but it is rich. It asks us to turn inward, to face what we've been avoiding, to integrate what we've been rejecting. It's about reclaiming the parts of ourselves we've lost or disowned. And in doing so, we come home to ourselves. Before we continue, if this kind of insight is something you want more of in your life, subscribe now and be part of this growing community. Also, share your thoughts in the comments. How has Jung's perspective changed how you see yourself? You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to look, willing to sit with the discomfort, willing to ask better questions. Because healing isn't a destination, it's a relationship with yourself. one that deepens over time, one that grows stronger with honesty, curiosity, and compassion. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. People don't just wake up one day and fully understand who they are. Most of us walk through life wearing masks, not only to hide from others, but to protect ourselves from truths we're not yet ready to face. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He believed that the journey to self-understanding begins not with what is visible, but with what is hidden. The parts of ourselves we refuse to look at, our fears, our insecurities, the emotions we label as bad, these become our shadow. And the shadow isn't our enemy. It's simply the part of the psyche that hasn't seen the light yet. Now think about this. How many decisions do we make every day without realizing what's driving them? We think we're acting freely, but so much of our behavior is driven by unconscious forces. Jung saw the unconscious not as a garbage bin of suppressed memories, but as a rich, complex part of the self that, when acknowledged, becomes a source of creativity, depth, and healing. It's only when we confront our shadow that we stop projecting it onto others. That person who annoys you, they might just reflect a part of yourself you haven't made peace with. If you've ever caught yourself reacting intensely to someone without fully understanding why, that might be your shadow speaking. And if you're enjoying this type of reflection, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We explore deep ideas like this every week, and your subscription helps us reach more curious minds like yours. Also, leave a comment below. What's a part of yourself you've come to understand better in recent years? Jung didn't believe in simple answers. Life is messy, people are contradictory, and truth is often paradoxical. He famously said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not just the polished version you present on social media, but the anxious, jealous, angry, confused parts too." Why? Because only when you accept yourself fully can you begin to live authentically. And authenticity, according to Jung, isn't about being different for the sake of being different. It's about aligning your outer life with your inner reality. There's a moment in everyone's life when the outside world stops being enough. Maybe it's after achieving something you thought would make you happy. Maybe it's after a personal crisis. That's when the inward journey begins. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole. It's not about perfection. It's about integration. You begin to gather all the broken parts of yourself, not to fix them, but to include them in the story of who you are. Many people confuse happiness with wholeness, but happiness is fleeting. Wholeness, on the other hand, gives your life a kind of gravity. You stop chasing surface pleasures and start looking for meaning. And meaning doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it requires loss, confusion, or solitude. Jung said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." True connection happens when we speak from the soul, not from the script. He also warned us about the danger of ignoring our inner world. When we fail to understand our inner life, we become vulnerable to ideologies, groups, or movements that give us a borrowed sense of identity. That's why Jung believed that healing the individual psyche is essential to healing the collective. One transformed person creates a ripple effect. You may not change the world, but by facing your shadow, you change how the world shows up for you. And if this resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know. We're building a community of thoughtful people here, people who aren't afraid to dig deeper. Share your thoughts in the comments too. What part of Jung's ideas speaks to you most? You might wonder, why do we resist this inner work? Because it's uncomfortable, challenges our identity. It makes us question things we've believed for years. Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But privilege implies responsibility. It means you can't blame your past forever. You can't hide behind trauma like a shield. Eventually, you have to ask yourself, what now? One of Jung's most compelling ideas was that symbols. There's something profoundly unsettling about realizing that most of what we call ourselves was never consciously chosen. Carl Jung often reminded us that beneath the surface of our polished identities lies a chaos we rarely dare to touch. But if we never meet that chaos, how can we ever say we've met ourselves? He believed that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. That's not just a poetic phrase. It's a warning. The very patterns you repeat, the relationships you attract, the fears you avoid, they all stem from hidden layers within you, shaping your story without permission. And once you see that, there's no unseeing it. Jung didn't want us to run from the darkness. He wanted us to integrate it, to confront the shadow without flinching. The shadow isn't evil in itself. It's simply what we've hidden, rejected, or suppressed. Think of every time you were told not to cry, not to be angry, not to want too much. Those parts of you didn't vanish, they were buried. And they wait there, influencing your choices in ways you don't even realize. But here's the paradox. The more we ignore the shadow, the more power it has. Yet when we bring it to light, it becomes a source of strength. By the way, if you find this kind of reflection valuable, make sure to subscribe. We dive into themes like this all the time, and if you're here, chances are this content speaks to something in you. And we want to keep exploring that with you. Jung's approach wasn't about fixing ourselves. It was about becoming whole. And wholeness includes the parts that scare us. He said, "I'd rather be whole than good." That hits different in a world obsessed with being liked, doesn't it? Because being good is often about performance. Wholeness is about honesty. And honesty demands that we admit our contradictions. You can be kind and resentful, loving and selfish, brave and terrified. These aren't flaws, they're human. The goal isn't to erase the complexity, but to own it fully. We live in a time that glorifies certainty. Opinions are posted like declarations. Identities are carved in digital stone. But Jung knew the self isn't static. It's a living process. He called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are, beyond roles, masks, and expectations. And individuation doesn't come through comfort. It comes through conflict, confusion, and confronting the unknown within. That's why so many people resist it, because it's easier to stay asleep in a familiar story than to wake up in the middle of a mystery. The path of individuation often starts with crisis. Something falls apart. A job, a relationship, a belief system. And suddenly, we're face to face with the truth that we don't know who we are without it. That's not a failure, it's an invitation. When the old story crumbles, space is made for something real to emerge. But it won't come from outside. Not from a book, not from a guru, not from a list of 5 tips for inner peace. It comes from listening to the quiet voice within, the one we've been trained to ignore. There's a reason Jung emphasized dreams. They're not just strange images. They're messages from the unconscious. They're clues, warnings, echoes of what we refuse to see during the day. Start paying attention to them, and they'll start revealing things you didn't know you knew. But it's not about interpretation. It's about relationship. Relating to the dream, dialoguing with it. What part of you is that monster chasing you? What are you really running from? These symbols aren't random. They're mirrors, and so are the people around us. Jung's idea of projection is one of the most powerful tools for self-awareness. Whatever irritates you in others is often something unresolved in yourself. That's not to say every conflict is your fault. But if you find yourself constantly triggered by the same traits in people, maybe it's time to look inward. The world becomes your teacher, but only if you're willing to learn. Every annoyance, every crush, every moment of jealousy, these are doorways into the psyche. You can either slam them shut or walk through. 50.